The bullets started flying this morning, and the worst fears were realized as the streets of Philadelphia become a battleground.
The entire block of Osage Avenue was enveloped in a tremendous tear gas cloud.
The whole block looked like we were in a war zone.
The situation appears to still be out of control.
People are starting to panic. They're starting to run.
The state police helicopter dropped what looked like a bomb right in the middle of the MOVE compound.
They made sure that the house burnt to the ground.
They're not fighting this fire as completely as they could.
The fire engulfed the entire house and then spread to a second home, a third home, a fourth home, then the whole block was gone.
All 11 bodies were reportedly found within the house walls.
They did not want one person to come out alive.
Now, if there's anybody there, it's obvious they couldn't survive.
It is murder. It wasn't an accident.
I think the police commissioner wanted to kill everybody in there.
Whether or not we killed anybody, that information is not available to me.
A pathologist found bullet fragments in 3 moved bodies.
I want the mayor of Philadelphia to stand here in my face and justify his position.
I stand behind that decision, and I just hope that the casualty will be very few.
They dropped the bomb on us.
Nothing justifies dropping a bomb on people.
In 1985, a U.S. city dropped a bomb on a house in its own neighborhood while children were inside. It happened in West Philadelphia, on a residential block of row homes in a quiet, middle-class black neighborhood called Cobbs Creek. The target was a single house at 6221 Osage Avenue, where members of a group called MOVE were living alongside several children. The device, packed with Tovex and C4 explosives, was dropped from a state police helicopter onto the roof of that home. The explosion sparked a fire, and rather than stopping it, officials made the decision to let it burn.
Commissioner Sambor said to me something to the effect, can we control that fire? I said, I think we can. He said, let's let the bunker burn.
I did tell him, in essence, in communication, I communicated to him that I would like to let the fire burn. The bunker burn.
Why didn't you get Mr. Brooks on the phone and say, put out the fire?
I did.
When?
At 6 o'clock.
How about at 6:30 and 7 and 7:30 and 8 and 8:30 as we all watch the television?
We talked about that throughout the evening, and we kept calling back and saying, what's going on? Why can't you put the fire out?
For the next 90 minutes, firefighters were held back as the flames spread from one house to the next. By the time it was over, 11 people were dead, including 5 children.
Well, why don't y'all stop from bombing the goddamn house down?
All right, listen what I'm saying. If you get enough people together.
Tempers flared just as the flames did tonight as West Philadelphians, many who have lived here all their lives, watched the fire consume more and more homes. First along Osage Avenue, then leaping to Pine Street. Robert Wilson leaned on his car in front of his Pine Street home and told me he could not believe what he was seeing.
You got innocent people that live around there on Osage Avenue, and they just, their properties is just going up in smoke, and ain't nothing nobody can do about it.
They dropped the bomb on the house to take care of one MOVE family. One move out, they done burn up 2 blocks. Explain that.
As the fire grew tonight, so did the anger of many West Philadelphians. They wondered why more was not done quicker to put out the fire.
You think they should be making more of an effort to put it out?
Sure they should. You mean to tell me all those people that got to suffer behind these few 5 or 6 people like this? A whole block is being burned down?
I really think they should have more engines out here, a lot more water and whatever to put that fire out, because they're just letting a lot of time go by, really.
61 homes had been destroyed, and more than 250 people were left without a place to live. No city official was ever criminally charged, and for decades, most Americans never even heard about it. In order to understand what led to the bombing on Osage Avenue, you have to go back to the late 1970s, when tensions between MOVE, their neighbors, and the Philadelphia police were reaching a boiling point. MOVE was a Philadelphia-based group founded in the early 1970s, built around a philosophy that rejected modern society and emphasized a return to what its members saw as a more natural way of living. Members lived communally, homeschooled their children, raised animals, and avoided modern technology. They spoke out against police brutality, environmental destruction, and the prison system, and they were known for using bullhorns to broadcast their beliefs. To supporters, MOVE represented resistance and the rejection of systems they believed were oppressive. To critics, especially their neighbors, they were disruptive, confrontational, and difficult to live beside. That tension didn't stay contained for long.
Until today, there was a house in Philadelphia filled with people who for years confounded everybody. They called themselves MOVE and never said what that meant. They tried to live in the city as if it were the forest, ignoring modern plumbing, trash collection, or rat control. They offended the neighbors first and then the city, which ordered them out last year. Today, the city went to move them.
By the mid-1970s, MOVE had established a headquarters in the Powelton Village neighborhood of West Philadelphia, where conflict with both neighbors and police escalated quickly. Residents complained about constant noise, unsanitary conditions, and frequent confrontations. At the same time, MOVE's relationship with law enforcement was deteriorating, particularly under Mayor Frank Rizzo, who took a hardline stance against the group.
The police will be in there to drag them out by the backs of their necks.
There will be a confrontation this time. There will be no barricades.
I don't know. It's up to them whether no barricades, Mike. They're going to be taken by force if they resist. No question about that. Children or not.
In 1977, a standoff began after city officials attempted to enter the MOVE house and were met by armed members. That situation stretched on for over a year, with police surrounding the area and restricting access to the neighborhood. Eventually, an agreement was reached for MOVE to leave the property and turn in members that had outstanding warrants. But when that deadline came and passed, and MOVE hadn't left or turned anyone in, police moved in. On August 8, 1978, a gunfight broke out.
There was this calm, and all of a sudden, you heard gunfire. I looked down, and Ramp, who had been kneeling down to take his position, basically he fell backwards. Blood was coming out of his mouth. I screamed in the phone, "Oh my God, they shot a cop."
When it ended, Officer James Ramp was dead, and 9 MOVE members were arrested and later convicted in connection with his death. They became known as the MOVE 9. They were all convicted and each sentenced to 30 to 100 years in prison. What made the case controversial was that all 9 were given the same sentence, even though police couldn't say who actually fired the shot that killed Officer Ramp. The prosecution argued that because they acted as a group, they all were responsible. For years, members of MOVE argued that the 9 had been unfairly convicted, many believing the office was shot by friendly fire and not the MOVE members.
I know the cops fired the shots throughout the whole thing. Ain't no doubt about it. Ain't no doubt about it. We didn't fire.
Who killed Officer Ramp?
One of them cops. And that's why they want to cover it up. That's why they want to cover it. Under the Rizzo regime right then and there, ain't no way in the world he would admit that his hand-picked Gestapo had shot each other to death. But them frantic cops admitted that they were shooting off rounds all throughout there, all right? Gunfire was going off for 5-10 minutes, all right? One cop, he's now FOP president, Bob Hurst, he admitted that he looked through our window, saw a group of women and children. He said women and children, unarmed, and he emptied his damn carbine at them.
Delbert Africa yesterday told me that you had seen some women and children through the basement window and then emptied your carbine rifle through that window.
No, absolutely not. Delbert knows better than that. What I seen was Chucky Africa. Seen him clearly coming right up to the window. And I seen him with that Mini Ruger 223, and I said that. And that's what I seen. The only time I seen the women and children is at the time they were coming out of the window. when it was all over. I never seen them, women and children in there. You could hear them. Delbert's right on that. I mean, I knew they were in there.
Were you afraid that you could hit any of the women and children?
There was a possibility.
How did you feel about the possibility?
Well, I didn't like that possibility at all. I mean, I don't like that. But I don't know who's firing back at me either. I mean, you don't know what's in the opposite end of that barrel.
After that confrontation, Move relocated. In 1981, they moved into a row home at 6221 Osage Avenue in Cobbs Creek, predominantly black, middle-class neighborhood where many residents had spent years building their lives. At first, the transition was quiet, but over time, familiar patterns started to return. Neighbors complained about regular disturbances, like loud broadcasts, confrontations, and concerns about the condition of the property. At one point, the Move members started to fortify the house. They boarded windows and built a structure on the roof that police later called a bunker. By 1985, frustration had reached a boiling point, and neighbors publicly appealed for intervention, saying the situation was becoming a serious problem.
About 1 o'clock, I said, oh my gosh, I got a rowdy block, child, you know, I got a rowdy block. If you could hear voices, but then I opened the window, and the first thing I heard was MF Santa Claus. I said, what the? It was MF Santa Claus.
Why did Move harass the neighbors on Osage Avenue?
Why did Move harass the neighbors on Osage Avenue? First of all, we did not harass the neighbors on Osage Avenue.
I met with them last night, some of them, about 20 of them, and they said that you harassed them.
Well,
beginning essentially in a major confrontation on Christmas Eve, 1983, by setting up a bullhorn and announcing Move's position to the neighborhood for hours on end, keeping their children awake, and also subjecting their children to profane language, which they objected to.
Okay, now, you finished with that?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, what took place on December 24th, 1984 was 1983 was a confrontation that Move had initiated against the city of Philadelphia. Concerning the use of the bullhorn and the use of profanity. Well, it's unfortunate that our confronting the system in the way that we did was to impose on their rights, but certainly it wasn't. In fact, it was to ensure them.
I went over to the Move house and talked with Frank James and Conrad and Teresa and Ryan to Africa about what their reason was to have all of this confusion on our block. They said, well, we are trying to get our people who are in jail unjustly because of the Powelton Village incident in 1978. They said, we want to get them released. They said, if we make you angry enough as residents, as our neighbors, then City Hall has got to respond.
What led to the neighbors' complaints is the position that we took, that we have innocent people in prison and we want them out. And our demonstrations to get our people out of prison. We talked on the loudspeaker, yes, we did. We told people that we were pushed to take the position that we're taking, that if they wanted to do something to eliminate the situation, to relieve it in some way, that they should be down City Hall complaining. We encourage people to go down City Hall and complain.
They said, we're going to put pressure on you until you put pressure on City Hall and make them let our people go.
In response, the city developed a plan to evict Move and arrest members with outstanding warrants. These warrants weren't major violent crime charges. They were offenses like parole violations and contempt of court. What was being planned was an eviction, but what would happen went far beyond that. The night before the operation, police evacuated residents from the surrounding area and told them they would be able to return within a day. They were told to grab a change of clothes and leave. Some residents later said they were threatened with arrest if they refused. The next morning, hundreds of officers surrounded the Move house. At around 5:30 a.m., Police Commissioner Gregor Sambor used a bullhorn to order the occupants of the Move house to come out. They didn't. Police then directed high-pressure water hoses into the home in an attempt to force the people inside out. Ramona Africa and Birdie Africa later described sheltering in the basement with the children as water poured into the house and conditions rapidly deteriorated.
And then the water start coming down on us. I mean, rushing down on us. It was hard to breathe. Our children were soaking wet.
When that failed, tear gas was pumped into the building, filling the house as the adults and children struggled to breathe. According to Ramona Africa's account, members of MOVE then decided to try to leave the house with the children.
We tried to get out after that. We tried to bring the kids out and we shot back into the house. They shot over 10,000 bullets. So that was their intent, to kill everybody in that house.
Police denied firing at people attempting to flee, but the police commissioner gave two versions of what happened. First, he claimed his officers fired shots at a MOVE man with the rifle in self-defense.
Fire was returned. As for the fact as to whether or not we killed anybody, that information is not at this present available to me.
Later, in the same press conference, he reversed his story.
Let me clear one thing up to the question about the firing in the alley.
About what?
About the return or the alleged return of fire by the stakeout officers against the people in the alley. There was no fire returned by the police officers for fear of hitting the child.
But investigators later said they could not explain why anyone would go back into a burning house unless they thought going back inside was safer than coming out. By the afternoon, the operation was at a standstill. Around 5:30 p.m., a state police helicopter flew overhead and dropped 2 explosive devices onto the roof of the MOVE house. The bomb damaged the bunker on the roof, but also started a fire that quickly spread down through the home. City officials then made the decision not to immediately extinguish the flames. Firefighters were held back as the fire spread beyond the MOVE house and across the connected row homes around it. When the fire was finally brought under control, the destruction had reached far beyond a single house. 61 homes had been destroyed, and more than 250 residents were left homeless. After the bombing, the city hired a private developer to rebuild the destroyed neighborhood. Residents were told they'd be returning to homes at least as good as the ones they'd lost.
We were told we would be made whole. And all we asked for was a strong, stable, sturdy, structured, beautiful home like we had. And instead, they gave us these cute little doll houses, literally, built with balsa wood and crazy glue.
These were people who had nothing to do with MOVE. They were homeowners. They had invested their entire lives into those properties, decorated them, maintained them, raised families in them. The city destroyed their homes, and the least it could do was build them back right. It didn't. By 1986, families started moving back in, and almost immediately, the problems started. Roofs leaked, walls cracked, foundations shifted, plumbing failed. The new construction was so far below the standard of the original homes that residents couldn't believe it. These people had owned solid, well-built row homes before the city dropped a bomb 2 doors down, and what they got back was falling apart before the paint dried. By 1995, the problems were so severe that the Ed Rendell administration brought in the United States Army Corps of Engineers to inspect the buildings. The Corps examined all 61 rebuilt homes and found that every single one of them was not up to code. The city tried to fix the defects. It spent years trying, and then it gave up. By 2005, Philadelphia stopped attempting repairs altogether and instead offered $150,000 to any resident willing to walk away. Leave your home, take the check, move on. Over 2/3 of the neighborhood took it. They were tired. They'd been through enough. The city had bombed their neighborhood, destroyed their homes, rebuilt them with construction so poor it couldn't pass inspection, failed to fix them, and then paid people to leave. By the end of it, the block was largely vacant. The community that existed before May 13, 1985, a tight-knit, largely middle-class black neighborhood with one of the highest homeownership rates in the city, was gone. Only 2 people made it out of the move house alive: 30-year-old Ramona Africa and 13-year-old Birdie Africa. Everyone else inside the house died. 6 adults and 5 children ranging in age from 7 to 14 years old. And even in death, the children of Move were not allowed to rest. In 2021, it was revealed that the bones of some of the Move bombing child victims, believed to be the remains of Tree Africa and Delisha Africa, had been held for decades by researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and Princeton University, without the knowledge or consent of their families. The remains had been used as teaching materials in an online forensics course. A professor was filmed handling the bones on camera and describing them clinically, without acknowledging that they belonged to children killed in the Move bombing. That same year, it was also revealed that Philadelphia Health Commissioner Thomas Farley had ordered the cremation and disposal of additional Move victims' remains in 2017, without identifying them or notifying the families. Farley later resigned under pressure. The remains, it turned out, had never actually been cremated and were eventually discovered in a box inside a medical storage room. And as questions resurfaced about how the victims' remains had been handled, another issue returned with them: how exactly the victims had died. The Move Commission's own forensic pathologist found buckshot fragments embedded in the arm of 12-year-old Delisha Africa, the same child whose family had been told she died in the fire. That pathologist classified the deaths of all 11 victims as homicides and concluded that the deaths of the 5 children were the direct result of deliberate decisions made during the operation. The Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office rejected those findings. For 37 years, every Move bombing victim's death certificate listed the manner of death as accidental. A bomb had been dropped from a helicopter onto a house the city knew contained children. Thousands of rounds had been fired into the building, and the resulting fire was deliberately allowed to spread. Yet the official manner of death remained accidental for nearly 4 decades. In 2021, historian Heather Ann Thompson uncovered autopsy documentation confirming the presence of buckshot fragments in Delisha Africa's remains. The evidence added new weight to long-standing claims from Ramona Africa and Birdie Africa that police had fired at Move members as they attempted to escape. In October 2022, the city of Philadelphia officially amended the death certificates of all 11 victims, changing the manner of death from accidental to homicidal violence. City officials also acknowledged that some victims showed no clear evidence of smoke inhalation, meaning the fire itself may not have been the sole cause of death. Gunfire, blunt force trauma, or the explosion could not be ruled out. It took 37 years for the city of Philadelphia to officially classify the deaths of 11 people, including 5 children, as homicides. Despite those findings, no criminal charges were filed against any city officials. The only person who served prison time in connection with the events was Ramona Africa. She was charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault, 3 counts of recklessly endangering another person, resisting arrest, riot, and conspiracy. A jury acquitted her on the more serious charges, aggravated assault and endangering the lives of policemen. But she was convicted on riot and conspiracy charges. She was sentenced to 16 months to 7 years in prison. She served her full sentence after repeatedly being denied parole. She was released on May 13, 1992, 7 years to the day after the bombing. Birdie Africa, the child who survived the bombing, later built a life of his own. But like many connected to the event, he carried the impact of that day with him for years. He died in 2013. The events on Osage Avenue raise questions that still don't have clear answers. How does a city reach a point where it uses that level of force against its own residents? How did a city in the United States drop a bomb on a residential neighborhood while children were inside, and then allow the fire to spread? How did thousands of rounds of ammunition get fired into a row home over relatively minor warrants? And how did something this significant fade so far from public memory? The Move bombing killed 11 people, including 5 children, destroyed 61 homes, and displaced an entire neighborhood in one of the largest cities in the country. Yet many Americans still know little or nothing about it.